This is your beginner's guide to the DJI Air 2S. What we're gonna do in this video is go through everything that you need to know about this drone to get up and flying fast. We're gonna go over everything that you're gonna find on the drone, the controller, the app, and then I'm gonna get into how you actually fly a drone and how you're going to use this drone to be able to get some good looking footage. At the end of this video, I'm gonna go through an exposure guide on how to get the best looking footage for video, as well as I'm gonna give you some tips around color grading. Now we have a ton of content to unpack in this video, so we're just gonna get started with part one, which is the drone itself. So when you get this drone initially, there's gonna be stickers all over it, and you're gonna wanna just peel all those off. Now, you're gonna see on the front, you have this plastic cover. This is not meant to be left on while flying. You need to remove this plastic cover. So on the bottom here, you'll just put your finger in the release, pull forward, and then release it out. Now to put this back on, you're gonna see these two little grooves at the top of the plastic cover. And you're gonna put that at the front of the drone, pull back and click, and you just wanna make sure your camera is centered because it's only gonna go in this plastic bubble in one way. And so when you're ready to fly, you're gonna pull off the plastic cover, and to open this drone, you pull the two front arms forward first, and then the back arms down. So it's forward and down. And once it's folded out, it's pretty much ready to go unless you don't have propellers put on. Now the propellers that this drone uses are these orange ones. And there's actually two types of propellers. And you'll notice the difference when you look at the center of the propeller where it connects. One version does not have a color, and then the other version has an orange ring. And the reason for this is there's two different styles of propellers to be able to make this thing fly. They're shaped different. So to know which propeller goes on which side, you just have to look at the motor itself. One motor doesn't have color on it, it's just black, and then the other motor has orange on it. So you match up the orange to the orange and the black to the black. Now to attach the propellers, you press in and twist in the direction that's labeled on the actual propeller itself. You'll see there's a little lock and an unlock. So if you ever need to replace your propellers, it's pretty easy to do. I always keep a set with me when I'm out flying because you never know if you accidentally hit something, you just need to replace the propeller. If there's any like cuts or fractures or cracks in these propellers, you'll want to replace them because the drone might not fly the same if there is some sort of damage on the propellers. Now for the battery compartment, it's on the back here, and you're gonna have these two release buttons on either side. You press on these and pull the battery straight out, and then when you want to put the battery in, you just drop it straight down. It's not gonna lock unless you press and hold, and you'll hear that click. Now let me go over everything that you're gonna see on the drone. So let's look at the front. You're gonna see the camera, and then you're gonna see two sets of sensors. There's forward-facing sensors, and then there's upwards-facing sensors. Now when we spin the drone to the left, you're gonna see a little port down here, and that's a USB-C. So if your drone is turned on, you can plug it into your computer, and you can actually transfer the data off the drone. You cannot charge your drone using this port. You have to pull the battery out and use the charger that's provided with the drone itself. Now, if you're shooting using the internal memory that is inside the drone, this is how you're gonna get it from the drone to your computer. Now, when we look at the back of the drone, there is two sensors. These are your obstacle avoidance sensors. Now let's look at the other side of the drone. You're gonna see another port down here. This is where you put in your micro SD card. Now I personally use 128 gigabyte micro SD cards. They seem to work fine, and I haven't had any issues with that. Just remember to dump your footage every day after you're done flying, because if your drone crashes, you lose it in some way, you're also gonna lose all that footage. I wouldn't fly for like weeks with a card in here and never dump. I try to dump all my footage at the end of the day. Now, when we flip the drone over, you're gonna see your obstacle avoidance sensors, and then you're also gonna see a light down here on the bottom. This is your landing light. And when it's in a darker situation, this will automatically turn on, and I'll show you where you can do this in the menu settings. Now that's it. Once you're ready to fly, all you need to do is pull the arms out, make sure the propellers are tight, make sure the battery is tight, make sure there's nothing that is causing the gimbal to be stuck, make sure it's free flowing, and then you're good to start flying. Now the last thing that you might want to do is add filters onto the camera. This is pretty simple with this drone. So all you need to do is turn the filter that's on here, the clear one, counterclockwise. Pull the filter straight off, and then you can replace this with an ND filter. I'm using the ND filters that came with the drone from DJI. And these attach the same way that the other one came off. So make sure they're a little bit offset when you put it in, and then click it clockwise, and then just do a double check, make sure it's on there tight, and then you're good to go. ND filters are great if you want to be able to get more motion blur in your footage, or you want to shoot more long exposure style photography. All right, so let's get into the next section, which is the controller. Now, there's actually two types of controllers that you can use for this drone. The standard gray controller that comes with it is perfect if you want to use your phone as a monitor. However, you can also use the DJI Smart Controller. Now, this controller is a little bit heavier, but it does have a screen built into it down here on the bottom. And this is the controller that I prefer to use when I'm out flying, because then I don't have to rely on my phone to be the screen. And this actually has a memory card built into it, so I can record the transmission from what I'm filming here on the screen. This also does screen records as well. So I always have a backup of the footage rather than having the footage be recorded on my phone and then eat up all my phone space. But let's go over the standard controller that comes with the Air 2S. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is screw on the thumb joysticks. And when you're not using these and you're transporting this controller, they just go right here in the bottom. There's these two little cutouts for the thumbsticks. Now to set up the controller, you pull on the top part here, which is the antenna. That's going to release out, and you set your phone right in the slot. You'll see there's some grooves that your phone will fit in perfectly. Now for the cable, it comes with your iPhone cable already attached, and you're going to pull out the left side, and then this will plug into your phone. Now after you attach the phone to turn on your controller, you're going to click the power button once and then hold till you hear that beep, and now the controller is on. And once the controller is on and it's connected to your phone, either the DJI app will automatically start, or you'll go into your phone and start the app and it will be connected, ready to go. Now when you turn on your drone with this original Air 2S controller, it will automatically be connected. However, if you do need to reconnect this controller, or you want to connect the smart controller, you're going to have to go into the menu setting, set up pairing on whatever device you're going to use first, and then you hold the drone power button for 4 seconds, and then it will automatically connect. Now let's go over all the buttons on this controller. So when you're looking at the front of the controller, you have your two joysticks, and we'll go over directionality on what these two joysticks do in a little bit. In the middle, you're going to have these buttons that say Cine, Normal, and Sport mode. This is for the speed of your drone. So Sport is the fastest that your drone will fly. Normal is kind of in the middle, and then Cine is like super smooth. So if you're shooting video and you want to get smooth, subtle movements, then you're going to use the Cine mode. Now, something I use Sport mode for all the time is just taking off and getting into position. So I'll put it in Sport mode, I'll take off fast and fly out to where I want to start filming, and then I'll put it into Cine mode and start flying around. Because you only have so much time in the air, so you don't want to waste that if you're going super slow to get from point A to point B. Now in the upper left-hand corner, you're going to have a function button. And once we get into the menus, I'm going to show you what you can change here. But this is just an additional button that allows you to do some different things with the controller. The button with the H on it is your return to home. So if you're out flying somewhere and you want the drone to automatically come home, you just press and hold this button, then take your hands off the controller and the drone will fly back towards you. And once we get into the menu, I'll show you what you can set with the return to home. Now in the upper right hand corner is your camera swap. So this will go from photo mode to video mode. Now let's look at the top of the controller. So looking straight down on the controller, on the left hand side you have this jog wheel. Now this is going to control your gimbal up or down. So you can use this to tilt your camera into the direction that you want for photos or video. And you can also use this while you're filming to be able to create movements with the drone tilting up or tilting down. Now on the right side, you're going to see a record and a camera button. This is how you start recording, or this is how you take a photo. Now on the bottom of the controller, this is where you charge it with a USB-C, and then that's it for this controller. There's not much more on it. But if you want more functionality and you want to have a screen built into your controller, then I also suggest you check out the DJI Smart Controller, because it's a great option that you can use for this drone. Let's go over the app. Now this is a big thing I want to cover in this video because there's a lot to unpack in the app. However, DJI has definitely simplified this app over time. When I first started flying drones, these apps were much more complicated. Now everything's pretty streamlined and it's pretty easy to use. All right, so let's dig into this app and let's see what all the buttons do. So when you first open the DJI Fly app, you're gonna see this screen. And in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see your location, but also right underneath that, that's where you're gonna see if you need to download new firmware. And you can see here, it's saying that I need to download new firmware, otherwise I can't even fly. So something that you always want to do is check this before you go somewhere and fly, because the worst thing that could happen is you get out to an awesome location and then all of a sudden you can't fly because the firmware needs to be updated and this app is not allowing you to fly. In the lower left-hand corner, you're gonna see your album. This is where you can check your photos, your videos. You have SkyPixel, which is DJI's social media platform, and then you have your profile for your DJI account. Now to fly, you just hit the Go Fly in the lower right-hand corner. This is the main screen, and this is what you see when you're flying. So whatever you're seeing here is what you're recording when you're filming or taking photos. Now in the upper left-hand corner, you can click this back button and it's gonna go back to the screen that we were just on. Now let's just go counterclockwise. I'm gonna go through everything that you're gonna see on the screen. C mode, that's what speed mode you're in, depending on how you have it set on your controller. Right now I have it in cine mode. I can switch over to normal mode. I can switch over to sports mode. Next to that, it's going to give you a status update. So right now it says takeoff permitted. And when you click on takeoff permitted, it goes to a pre-flight check. So if there's any issues with the drone, you're gonna see it pop up here where it says normal. Now underneath that, you're gonna have your auto return to home altitude. So what height do you want the drone to fly at when you click that return to home button? You can set that in here. So if you're in an area with trees, you wanna make sure that your auto height is set above those trees. Now, if you're somewhere where it's big and open, you might not need it to go super high in the sky to return to home. It just depends on your situation, but that's something you wanna set before you take off and fly. Now, underneath that, there is max flight altitude and max flight distance. Now, you can set these all the way up to 500 meters and no limit for distance. However, depending on where you're flying, what country you're in, what the regulations are, you're gonna have to make sure that these are set much lower. Because if you have it set to no limit or 500, that means the drone can go further than what the regulations say that you can fly. And you don't wanna get into some situation where you're flying where you shouldn't be. So just make sure you know the regulations in the country that you're flying and you set them here so that you don't go past those limits. Now to get out of the screen, you just click anywhere on the outside of the screen and it will go back to the main screen. Now next to that is going to be your battery life. When you're flying, you'll actually see how much time until it's gonna return to home, how much time until the drone's gonna force a landing, and how much time until the battery is completely depleted. So this is a good thing to keep in mind while you're flying. You don't want this to go down to 0. You also don't want this to go down to like 20, 30. So you wanna keep in mind how much battery you have left and make sure that you have enough to return to home before the drone actually forces a landing on you. I typically fly to the 30 or 40% battery life before I bring it back, and I make sure that I'm really close when I'm getting low on the battery. I have a bunch of extra batteries so that I could just swap it out, get the drone back up and keep flying. You don't wanna push it till you have like 0 left and the drone actually forces you to land and you're not in a place where the drone should be landing. Now the 0000 that you're seeing next to that is how much flight time I have left. You're only seeing zeros displayed because the drone's not actually flying. When your drone is flying, depending on the conditions and how much power the drone's using, this number is gonna fluctuate. Now, next to that is your RC signal. And when you click on it, you'll see that I have a strong RC signal. That's the signal that's going from the drone to the controller. Next to that is your obstacle avoidance sensors. And you can see right now they're normal. The vision sensors are working fine. Next to that is your GPS signals. Right now, I have a strong GPS signal. So that's how the drone knows where it is in the world so that it knows where return to home is. And it also keeps a record of where you're flying. Right now I have 17 satellites connected. Typically, if you have like less than 12, this will give you a warning and you have to wait till you have 12 or more before it can lock on a GPS home point. So you can take off, but it will fly in a mode where GPS is not being used. So when you click return to home, it might not come back to you. Just keep that in mind. You want a strong GPS signal when you're flying. Now, the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner is your menu, and we're gonna go through everything in that menu in a little bit. Underneath that is where you can swap between photo and video mode. So when you click on the film strip or when it's in photo mode, it's gonna be a little square. You can go into your different settings. So let's go through photo. You have single, smart, AEB, burst, and timed shot. Smart is kind of an HDR mixed with some automation to get the best photo out of the scene that you're in. AEB is going to take a series of shots at different exposures, so you can set that to 3 or 5 photos. Burst is just a burst of photos, so if you want to take 7 photos trying to capture like action or something, this is a good way to do that. And then underneath that is time shot, and you can set how much time before the camera takes a photo. If you click down in the video, you're going to see different options. You have normal or you have slow-mo. So if you want to shoot at 120 frames per second, you have to go to this slow motion mode, and then it will be set for slow-mo. In normal, you can shoot up to 60 frames per second, and I'll show you where you change that because it's different than other drones in DJI's lineup. They used to have a little menu right here where you would set your frame rates and resolution, but now it's in a different part of the screen. So we'll get to that in a second. Underneath your video is your master shots. Master shots is an automation mode that DJI has put into this drone. So you basically just have to select a subject, and DJI is going to shoot a series of different shots depending on the location. And it's going to use those shots and create a video automatically for you. And then quick shots at the bottom is a series of automations, but these are just single shots. These are a way to get a cool drone movement without actually having to fly yourself. You just click on your subject, click the quick shot that you want to use, and then the drone's automatically going to get that shot for you. The big red button underneath that is your record button. This is how you start and stop record. You could also use the record on the controller itself. Either way will start and stop the recording. Next to that, it says AF. So this is where you could set manual focus or autofocus. When we're in autofocus, you can just tap on the screen and it's going to automatically focus, and also it's going to automatically set exposure for what you've tapped on. Now, if you click manual focus, you can hold the MF and change your focus by going up and down with your finger. Personally, I just fly with autofocus turned on and I haven't really had any issues. There's been no reason to use manual focus yet. Underneath that is a little play button, and that's going to go to the previous videos and photos that you've shot. So when we go into the screen, you can see that all your photos and videos will pop up. That's on the aircraft or in your DJI Fly app. Now you can use your batch select, you can select a bunch, you can download them to your phone, or you can delete them from right here in the app itself. Now, if you want to use the DJI app to be able to create some videos, that's what this little button in the right-hand corner is for. You click create, there's templates, there's some different things that you can do to be able to make little videos out of your footage. Upper left-hand corner, it'll go back to this original screen. Now in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you're gonna see auto or manual. Right now it's set to auto. You click this, it's going to go to your manual settings to control the camera. Now let's start with auto. So in auto, you're basically only going to see storage, resolution and frame per second, and exposure value. So when you click storage, it's going to show you how much storage is on your memory card versus how much is on the drone itself. If you tap on resolution and frames per second, this is where you change what resolution you want to film at and what frame per second you want to film at. So at 5.4K, you have the options between 24, 25, and 30. You click 4K, you can go all the way up to 60 frames per second, 2.7 and 1080 are the same. So you could shoot anywhere from 24 all the way up to 60 in all the resolutions except for 5.4K, which is limited by 30 frames per second. Now, when we go to exposure value, this is something you can set if you're not getting the proper exposure out of a scene and you're using auto. So if the drone is not calculating the scene properly, it needs to go a little darker, you pull left on this, but if it needs to go brighter, you pull right. And basically it's taking auto and then it's adding exposure to that or lowering the exposure from that. Now let's click the lower right-hand corner and we're gonna go into our manual settings or pro settings. So you have 6 different settings that you can set here. You have your resolution and frames per second. You have your storage, we went over those. You now have white balance right here on the screen. You can go from auto to manual and you could set all the way from 10,000 Kelvin down to 2,000 Kelvin. You could set your shutter speed from auto to manual. So when auto is blue, it's turned on. When it's pressed and it's black, it's turned off. So if you want more motion blur out of your footage, you're gonna use an ND filter, and then you're gonna wanna use a shutter speed that's double that of your frame rate. Now, when you click the ISO, it's the same thing. You can adjust your ISO here auto or manually. So you can go all the way up to 3200 for the ISO and all the way down to 100. Now, you also have access to exposure value in the pro settings. And this basically kicks on if you have any sort of automatic settings set. So if your shutter speed or your ISO is set to auto, basically it's taking that auto exposure value that the drone thinks is good, and then you're just going to add exposure or lower the exposure from that. Now, when I've turned all these settings to manual, you'll see that now it says MM, which is meter mode. Basically, what that's saying is the scene looks a little dark and it needs to brighten up, but it's not going to do it for you because you're set to manual on everything. So it's giving you a suggestion on how you should expose the scene for what the drone thinks the best look is out of the scene that's in front of you. In the lower left-hand corner, there's a few things we need to go over. You have distance and height. So this is just how far the drone is away from you and how high the drone is from the starting point. In the lower left-hand corner, you have your map. And when you click this twice, it will go to a full screen map. So let's just go over some of the things that have popped up now that we brought map full screen. And these are all on the right-hand side. So first is the information that it's going to show. So you could turn off restricted zones, altitude zones, all of this. You can turn this on or off depending on what you want to see on your map. Typically, I leave these all on so I know what's around me when I'm flying. The next button is the erase button. So when you're flying the drone, it's going to create a line where you've flown, and this will just erase it. The H button is going to return the map to home. So like you could scroll around and you click that and it's going to return to home. The next button is going to give you true north. And then underneath that is going to be the different types of modes that you can pop up on this map. You have your standard mode, you have a satellite mode, which shows a satellite image of what's around you. And then you have mixed, so you're getting both the standard and the satellite. Now underneath that is airplane information. You could tell the drone what you want to be displayed: high collision risk, medium high collision risk, or low medium high collision risk. So it's just different settings that show you, when a plane's near you, are you at risk to collide with that aircraft? And the last thing is find my drone. So you could use the maps that pops up. You click start flashing and beeping, and then the drone's going to start flashing and beeping. So if you lost your drone, like say in the woods or something, this is an easy way to just put some lights on and create some sound so you can find it again. So to go back to what the camera's seeing, you just click the box in the lower left-hand corner. It'll automatically go back to the screen. Now the two other buttons that you're going to see are on the left side of the screen. You're going to have your automatic takeoff. So you'll click that and then you'll press and hold, and then the drone is going to automatically take off. Now to land, you're going to do the same thing in reverse. Click this button in the left side, press and hold, and the drone's going to automatically go down and land. And the last button on the side is obstacle avoidance indication. So you could see right now my obstacle sensors are working. If I switch into sport mode, they're going to turn off. So it's not going to sense objects that you're flying into when this is red. Now, the other thing that you could see are these orange lines on the top and bottom. That's your sensors saying that there's something in the way. So if you were to coming up onto like a tree or something, you're going to see this orange bar pop up. And right now, because of where I have the drone positioned, it's seeing something on the front and back telling me that there's obstacles in the way. Next, let's go into the advanced menu settings. So on the screen, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, those three dots. Let's click those. And now let's go through each of these because there's a lot of different options in this part of the app that will help control your drone. So let's first go look at the safety. With your obstacle avoidance system, you have two options. You can either bypass an object, which will move around an object, or you can brake and it will just stop at an object. Or you can turn your obstacle avoidance off. I like to keep mine on bypass so it goes around whatever object goes in front of it. Now underneath that is disable sideways flight. So when you do this, the drone's not going to move side to side. There's no sensors on the side, so this is helping in not allowing you to crash into something left or right. Now underneath that is your flight protection. So max altitude, max distance, auto return to home. We set these in that pre-flight checklist, but you could also do it here in this menu. You can update your home point. So when you update your home point, you can drag this around, find where you want to set your home point, and then click the OK button. Now underneath that, you have your sensors, your compass, and your IMU. And if there's any issues, that's where you can calibrate it. Now next is your battery info. You'll click that. It's going to show you all the information about your battery, voltage, temperature, how many times you've charged it, production date, just anything you need to know about your battery. Now we have our auxiliary LED light. So this is set to auto and you can turn it on or off. This is the light that's under the drone. And when you turn it on, it will just be on. Auto, when it gets dark out and you're landing, this automatically kicks on. The next option down is unlock geozone. Then you have find my drone. And this is that same find my drone that we had earlier when we went into the maps. You can also access that here. Then we go into advanced safety settings. And in this menu, there's a few options. So if you lose signal to your drone, you can return to home, descend, or hover. So depending on the situation that you're in, You might not want it always to return to the home if it loses signal. You might want to just stop and hover. Now, if you pull both joysticks in or out in an emergency, it will stop the propellers completely. Now, you can set this to anytime, but the issue is if you use that anytime setting, you might just shut the drone off while you're flying if you put the stick directions in those two ways. And then at the very bottom is your air sense. This is where you can enable it or disable it. And that tells you when there are other planes in the area. Now, the last setting in the safety menu is your aeroscope. You can click that. And this is where you can add in your identification number and your flight information. And this is a feature that allows observers on the ground to be able to see whose drone is up in the air based on the identification number and the flight information that you typed in here. The next setting over is control, and you're going to want to set up how you have your units displayed. I'm going to use Imperial. You can turn on subject scanning. That's going to automatically display subjects in the camera view. Now, underneath that is your gimbal mode. Follow mode is the typical drone movement, whereas FPV is going to add some tilt left and right. It's going to feel more like an FPV drone. Now, next is upward gimbal rotation. This allows your gimbal to go past level. So I have this turned on because I do use that all the time when I'm flying and getting some shots where I can tilt up just slightly. Next is your gimbal calibration. And then underneath that is advanced gimbal settings. And this is where you can dial in your gimbal. So you can see here, there's pitch speed, pitch smoothness, yaw speed, yaw smoothness. And you could do this for all three: normal, cine, and sport mode. So you can really get in there and customize your gimbal to be able to move how you want to when you're out flying. Next section is the remote controller, and you have phone charging, so the controller will charge the phone while you're flying. You have your stick mode. I just use stick mode 2, but if you want to use a different variation, this is where you go in and change it. Next is your button customization. So this is where, so remember that FN button on the controller? This is where you change it. So there's two options. There's a tap and there's a double tap. And you could change this to all of these different settings. You can recenter, auxiliary light, toggle map and live view, gimbal follow FPV mode, advanced camera settings, auto exposure lock and unlock, and hyperlapse cruise control. And you have the same settings in the double tap. So set that up for the two functions that you want on your controller. Next is the RC calibration. So if you need to calibrate for any reason. And then at the very end, you have your flight tutorial, which is more tutorials about flying your drone. And then your controller link is at the bottom. So if for any reason you need to repair your controller, you do that here, and then you go through the process of put it into pairing mode on the controller, hold the top button of the drone for 4 seconds while it's on, and then they will connect. Next is camera settings. So first is format, MP4 or MOV. Then you have your color. In this drone, we have normal, HLG, or D-Log. You have your coding format, which is H.265. Anti-flicker, you can turn on if there's any sort of flickering happening with your video. Next, in general, you have your histogram, which tells you all your exposure values. You have your overexposure warning. You have grid lines, so you can put different overlays when you're flying to be able to compose your shots. Then you have peaking levels, which is for focus. So when you go to manual mode, you can see that the red pops up. And when it's out of focus, it's not red anymore. Now you have white balance. You can adjust it here. You can also adjust it on the main screen where I showed you earlier. The next area is where you can format your SD card or your internal storage. You just click one of these and then click the format button. Next is cache when recording. And what this for is to have an extra copy of what you're filming recorded on the phone. Next is transmission. You can do smooth or HD. So HD is going to be the clearest, whereas smooth is going to be less dropouts. You can do your frequency as 2.4, 5.8. I just leave it on dual band. And then you could do channel mode, auto, or manual. Again, I just leave it to auto. I don't really touch these settings. And then the last tab is about. This is where you could check for updates on your drone. You can name your drone. Basically all of the information about your drone. All right, now we've gone over everything that you need to know about the drone. Let's get into the first flight and how you actually maneuver the drone in the air. Now we're ready for the first flight. There's a few things that you need to do before you go out and fly though. The first is check your batteries. Second is check your SD card. And third is turn everything on and make sure it's all connected, the connection's stable, and that there's no major updates on the drone. You don't want to get out there, not have battery, not have space to record, or not even be able to fly because the drone has a forced update. So those are just things that you want to check before you leave your house. Now, what you're going to want to do is find a location that's completely open, like a park or a field. And you just want an area where you can fly around and not have any obstacles in your way. So when you get out to your location, the first thing you want to do is put the phone in the controller, turn on your controller, fold out your drone, turn on the drone, and now you're ready to go. Now, the first thing you want to do is use the app to take off and land. And you're just going to want to take the drone up, let it hover for a little bit, and then bring it back down and land. You just want to make sure that you understand how that works. I also suggest doing this manually, which you do by pushing both sticks inward. That will start the propeller rotation. And then you push up on the left joystick, and that's going to take the drone up into the sky. Now, to land manually, you're just going to pull back on the left joystick, and then that's going to bring the drone down, and you keep holding it until the drone turns off. That's all you need to do. Now, once you figure out takeoff and landing, the next thing is to fly. So let's go over the different directionalities for when you're flying. When we're looking straight down at the drone, you're going to have two joysticks. The right one is for movement, and the left one is for bringing the drone up and also rotation. So when you push forward on the right joystick, it's going to push the drone forward in space. When you pull back, it's going to move backwards. Now, left and right does a side-to-side motion. So think of it, when the drone's facing straight ahead, if you push right, the drone's going to move right. But the camera's going to stay continually pointed in that same direction. So it's sliding left or right. On the left joystick, if you push up, the drone's going to ascend into the air. If you pull down, the drone's going to descend, head towards the ground. And if you push left or right, it's going to rotate the drone. So think of it spinning on an axis. There's no movement anywhere in space, it's just rotating around. So you're going to use a combination of both of these thumbsticks to get the shots and move the drone in space. And I highly suggest just play around in a big open field and fly the drone around. See how all the motion works, and you're really just going to have to practice. The biggest thing when it comes to flying a drone is practice. You get good by practicing a lot. So just getting out there and using the different directionalities and figuring out how to move the drone in space, and then combining that with the cine, the normal, and the sport mode is going to help you really learn how to move the drone in space, so that when it comes time to get a really cool shot, you're going to know exactly how to move the drone to be able to get that shot. Let's cover active track, master shots, and quick shots. All of these work very similar. So for master shots and quick shots, basically you turn on whatever mode that you want to shoot in, and then you draw a box around your subject or just select on the screen, and the drone will automatically select the subject. Now from here, you can dial in your settings of the master shot or the quick shot. You can use auto or manual settings in the lower right-hand corner. And then you hit start and let the drone do the rest. Now to use active track, all you need to do is draw on the screen and grab your subject, or tap on the screen to grab your subject. And you're going to see three modes pop up: active track, spotlight, and point of interest. So point of interest is just an orbit around your subject, and you can set the speed of how fast you want this orbit to happen. Active track means that the drone will actively track your subject, and it will either follow behind, in front, or you can trace to the side using the parallel mode. And then spotlight keeps your subject centered no matter what, but doesn't actually move the drone. But when it's in spotlight mode, you can manually fly the drone and it will always keep your subject centered. So I like to use this mode to be able to get more dynamic looking shots that I can't get manually, because the drone's always going to keep my subject centered, and I can just focus on creating big sweeping motions with the drone. Now, last thing in this section I'll go over are ND filters. And I know a lot of people just slap these on the front of their drone without actually knowing exactly what these are for. So an ND filter, or a neutral density filter, is basically sunglasses for your camera. And the reason that you use an ND filter on a drone is so that you can bring down your shutter speed so that you can get more cinematic looking footage. Now for beginners who are just getting into flying, you don't need to use ND filters. They're great in some situations where you're flying close to objects and you want to get a specific look. But just slapping an ND filter on isn't going to just give you better footage. You have to understand the mechanics behind it, and you have to understand how to set your settings so that you're taking advantage of being able to get motion blur. So before you start jumping in to add things to your drones like ND filters, I would highly suggest just learning everything else about your drone. And then down the road, you can add in using ND filters and really learn how to master these so you can get the most cinematic looking footage out of your drone. Now let's talk about getting the proper exposure for your drone. This camera is a 10-bit camera, so you can do a lot in post with color grading, but if you don't expose properly, color grading in post isn't going to fix your image. So in the camera, there is a few different things that you can do to be able to get proper exposure. So using the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner, we're going to go to the camera menu. And in the camera menu, we're going to turn on our histogram and our overexposure warning. So the histogram is this box right here in the center, and that's going to show you all your values from 0, which is black on the left, and white, which is 100 on the right. So this is all your exposure from the darkest parts to the lightest parts. Now I just put this off to the side. Now the overexposure warning are these zebras that you're seeing in the upper left-hand corner. And you can see when I flip this to manual, everything is overexposing that has those black hash lines on it. And when I bring down and when I pull up my shutter speed, you can see that it goes away. So anything with those lines on it is overexposed, meaning that it's above 100%. And one thing that I found when playing around with this footage while I'm color grading is that if you overexpose in camera, there's no way of recovering those highlights. There's other cameras like the Sony a7S Mark III where you actually have a little bit of wiggle room where if you overexpose, you can bring some of those highlights back. In this camera, if it overexposes, you've lost that part of the image. So you're going to use a combination of your histogram and your overexposure warning to make sure that parts of your image aren't fully overexposed. And then in reverse, you also want to make sure that nothing's underexposed, because if you record too dark and try to boost them in your editing software, you're going to get a lot of noise in your footage. You want to try to get the best exposure possible in camera, and then you could do some color grading from there. So D-Log is a flat setting. This is going to give you the most range to be able to color grade in post. I would use D-Log to film in if you're planning to color grade. Now you could see that I'm still getting everything on the left is overexposed, and on the histogram, everything is pushed towards the right of that histogram. So I would go and adjust my shutter speed. So what you want to do is adjust your exposure so you have no major parts of your image overexposing and blowing out. And also you want to adjust your exposure so the values are in the middle of your histogram graph. That's going to give you the most range to be able to edit this in post. Now, footage like this, you'll be able to push around and be able to do some artistic color grades with, whereas if you had overexposed or underexposed, you're not going to have as much ability to be able to correct it in post. All right, so the next section is all about color grading, and we're just going to go through some tips that I have on how you can make this footage really pop. Now this section, I want to go through color grading and just some brief tips about when you're actually processing this footage. The cool thing about the Air 2S is that it is a 20 megapixel 10-bit camera, so it's more set up to do color grading and gives you a little bit more flexibility when you're in post. So let me show you some tricks on how you can color grade this footage to make it pop, and you can do this in most editing software. Now what I typically do is I pull up my waveform just to see where all my exposure values are in this scene. And basically you want a decent exposure across the range. Down here at 0 is black, and up here 100 is completely white. So if you're exposing properly when you're out shooting, then you should have a decent look out of the shot. Now I might just tweak this a little bit more, bring up my highlights, bring down my midtones, just because I've noticed that the mid-range of exposures tend to expose a little bit bright on DJI drones, and that's just something I've seen on a bunch of their drones. So I typically bring down the midtones and even it out a little bit. Now, I also like to play around with the colors. So I'll use the hue and saturation curves, which actually change the colors within this. You can see that the ground here is very yellow. I mean, it's the desert, it's dirt, but if you want to create a little look to that, I might take those oranges and yellows and push them a little bit more into the red spectrum. And then the sky is very blue, and I might pull that up into the teal. And then what I could do is use my hue and luma curves and bring down the exposure of the ground so it's not so intense. So it's a little bit more evened out. And then I'll go back to my main color wheels, and I could play around with my saturation. So if I really want it to pop, I might add some saturation and make that pop. Now here's the before and after of this shot. And just with a few minor tweaks with the exposure and a little bit with the colors, you create a completely different look out of this footage. And the best thing is that with this drone, you have that 10-bit footage, so you do have more room to play around with color grading. Now, if you want to learn more about color grading, I'll put a playlist down in the description that has a bunch of tutorials all around color grading, and we go much more in depth in how you can create looks on your footage. And next, I highly suggest you check out this playlist right here. It goes through a ton of different drone moves that you can use to get better looking shots when you are out flying. All right, I'll see you on the next one.